Hey everybody, welcome back to week 7. We want to do a quick recap of this past week. This past week was probably the most interesting fantasy week that we could look at this season, but at the same time, I feel like we've said that a few times this year already. But it was definitely an anomaly, especially from the injury perspective. So we got a chunk of injuries that we need to run through. It's kind of a joke at this point how many people are actually injured and out for multiple weeks or for the season. But to kick us off, I want to jump into some reactions from this past week. Starting with my first thought here, Sam, I'm hard pressed not to say this. I know they don't have the perfect record like the Chiefs, but I'm pretty sure the Ravens are the best team in the league.
I think so too. I think if they played the Chiefs right now, I think that they would win. But the Ravens have historically been a very good regular season team and always find a way to kind of choke in the playoffs. I think right now we're looking at in both divisions or both conferences, we see a lot of really good teams. But I think right now the Ravens are the only elite team. My only question mark for them is can they actually keep this going once they get into the playoffs?
Yeah, there's no real team that has stood out to me like they have overall. It's actually kind of crazy when I look at it. They've played the best, they've looked the best, and there's not really even a competition there when it comes down to it. But at the same time, as you said, they haven't performed in the playoffs, but they also did not have Derrick Henry, who has looked pretty incredible this entire season so far, barring like one or two games. The dude's running multiple times for over 150 yards. It's just getting nuts, and I think it's just alleviated a lot of the pressure off of Jackson's back, making it a little bit easier for him, knowing he's got that big workhorse behind him. They've been really fun to watch. Last night's game was really fun to watch, and Jackson putting up 5 touchdowns is what enabled me to win my one league.
Yeah. No, I think the only team that kind of can maybe take that title of best team in the league is the Lions. I think obviously Ravens have the edge at QB though. Lamar is obviously better than Goff. But Goff the past few weeks, when he has time in the pocket, he has a clean pocket, he's like a top 5 QB in the league, like across.
He's played incredible.
Yeah, like every major statistical category, he's like top 5. So I think that might be our Super Bowl matchup, Ravens and Lions, and then we'll see. But that's who I was kind of hoping for last year. But I'm guessing that's what we're going to see this year.
Yeah, there's not much else after those two as far as teams for me that really just stand out as being fully built, to say the least. But it's going to be fun to watch. Obviously, the rest of the season, see if anybody gets their crap together and pulls it through. I think there are a few teams out there that could turn the tables. They have talent, but they just haven't looked great. I mean, the Vikings have looked really good with Sam Darnold behind the helm, but I think the Ravens for me are just the team that they're going to give you trouble no matter what week you go out and you play them. And I'm actually surprised they've lost 2 games.
Yeah, early season rust, but I think they're going to steamroll the rest of the season.
All right, next one. This is pretty much my take going off of just what I've seen. One, I think the 49ers are done for the year. And the second part of this is I think the Bucks are also done after this past week, which will clear up a little more as we get into the injuries.
Yeah, the Bucks one's unfortunate. I really thought that they were one of the better teams in the NFC, and it's not due to talent declining or coaching or Baker Mayfield falling off a cliff. They've just been ravaged by injuries now with Mike Evans being out for a few weeks and Godwin, who was the number 1 fantasy receiver, out for the year and looks like his foot was twisted in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
So that's unfortunate. The Niners, it's tough. I was looking at the NFC playoff picture. Right now we have 4 NFC North teams that would, if the playoffs started today, would all be in it. I imagine one of them will fall out as we get into more like divisional matchups between them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that final playoff spot in the NFC is going to come down to the Niners, Eagles, and Dallas. I don't think any of those teams look particularly great, so I think it could be a toss-up. But no, I don't think the Niners have a chance of winning the Super Bowl this year.
No, I think they're shot. I don't think they're going to get there this year. I know people go with the coaching. I think the loss of McCaffrey. I think the loss of Ayuk, despite the fact that he has not had as great of a season as people have expected him to have, are just really, really big losses. You're losing two of your biggest offensive weapons, and that's just going to leave the floor for Debo to get double teamed all over the place. Juwan Jennings is hurt too. I haven't heard any word on when he's going to be back. Their receiver core is very weak, and you can look at me and be like, but Ricky Pearsall is going to come in and he's going to crush it. He's not ready. He barely played in training camp because of what happened to him off field, unfortunately. But it's going to be really hard for them, and I think they lost a defensive player this week too. I forgot to mark it down. One of their better defensive players went down too, but I think they're just too banged up, like everybody else in this league at this point, that it's going to make it really hard for them to pull through. But it's the NFL, and if we've seen anything, everyone is getting hurt. So in the end, it might not matter, and other teams get hurt, and they can just jump right in there and do what they got to do. But I'll say one thing, the Chiefs shut down the 49ers no matter what time they play them. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders this year, but their division isn't that strong either. The Seahawks are up and down. It seems like one week they're an elite team, the next week they're terrible. So it's tough to gauge them.
Yeah, they just lost Metcalf.
Yeah, they just lost Metcalf. Let's see, the Cardinals, they're very up and down as well with basically boom or bust Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. performances. And the Rams are good, but banged up as well on defense and on offense, although they are getting Kupp and Puka back over the next few weeks each. So
It'll be too
I
late.
don't think that division is sealed yet. I think the Niners will find a way into the playoffs, but this is the weakest they've looked in several years.
Yeah, it'll be too late for the Rams to make a comeback by the time their players get back. James Conner had a good week this week, though. He had like 152 all-purpose yards, which really made a difference for them, even though Kyler's the reason they won that game. The Cardinals are a mess, man. I don't know how to really put a finger on what the hell they're doing down there. But all right, let's move into the injuries, which is making me tear up a little bit because of thinking about my fantasy teams. Kicking it off with some of the ones that don't really matter too much. Curtis Samuel is out. They don't know if he's going to play this week. He has a shoulder injury. He did not play this past week. I'm sure most of you probably aren't starting him anyway, so it's probably not really relevant unless you are in an emergency situation. Next, Deshaun Watson, much to the appeal of the Browns fans, has gone down, so he will no longer be starting for the rest of the year with a ruptured Achilles. I was really surprised they started Peoples-Jones over Jameis Winston. That kind of blew my mind, but then he got hurt too.
Yeah, well, I think before Watson got hurt, there were rumors of a Winston trade to another team. So they moved him down to like emergency QB. I think they want to. I mean, they tried out Dorian Thompson Robinson a few times last year. He just didn't look that great, but he was a rookie and like a late round pick, so
Yeah.
maybe he's grown a little bit. Not really sure. You know what you're getting with Jameis at this point, which is he will air the ball out, but he will
Throw
turn
interceptions.
the ball over. Yes. So maybe they want to see what they have in their younger player and see if they can, get another Brock Purdy or something from it.
Be nice. Be real nice. Continuing, David Montgomery has a calf injury. He was hurt in the game. He left the game. He came back in, but didn't play as much as he was. They left that to Gibbs at that point because there was just no point in risking further injury on Montgomery. So they're keeping an eye on him. I don't expect him to miss any time from what I'm seeing online, but it is just something to monitor. Calf injuries can be troublesome, just like hamstring. And speaking of hamstring, Juju missed when people were expecting him to finally possibly hit the ground running for a little bit. Juju missed it with the hamstring injury, and they're not sure if he's going to play this week either. So hopefully you might have picked him up on the waiver wire, but it doesn't look like you might get the chance to be starting him anytime soon.
Yeah, it seems like Noah Gray might be the target leader for Kansas City for the next week or two, which is
Noah Gray and Xavier Worthy.
Just leave Worthy out. Statement, yeah.
Granted, he's not getting that yet. Aiden O'Connell gets the start and breaks his finger. So, damn shame, man. He's going on the IR. It looks like broken finger. He's not going to be able to play, which means the Minshew mania gets to continue and all his interceptions.
Or maybe they did sign Desmond Ridder off the Cardinals practice squad. So, in a very deep dynasty superflex league, maybe worth a zero fab pickup, but
to sit on your bench in case someone gets hurt.
Yeah, just see how much they hate Minshew there.
Oh, dude, it's painful to watch. Next, and this is where the gut wrench of my redraft league starts to come into play. Brandon Ayuk, torn ACL and MCL. He is done for the year. He will most likely be out, if not to the start of the season, into next season, because of when this is happening in October. Usually ACL, MCL combinations, you're out at least a year. So I don't know when we're going to see him again. That's one down in my redraft league. Next, we have... I'll continue with the Niners here. Debo is out. He could barely play this past week because he got pneumonia. They don't know if he's going to play this week. What?
Yeah, he was hospitalized with pneumonia, too.
So. Yeah, he went to the hospital after the game.
Yeah.
The fact that he was even trying to play, what's wild is that they said he came down with it like during the pregame. I'm like, come on. You waking up with that. Like, there's no way. But, yeah, he was in the hospital, so I doubt he'll play this week. If he does, and he's green lit and healthy, he's going to be a wide receiver one with, like, immense upside. Next, much to the chagrin of my redraft league, DK Metcalf, grade 1 MCL sprain. He's in a week-to-week state. The coach seemed optimistic that it was minor and that maybe he'll play this week. I'm hoping for my redraft team because that's two of my receivers between DK and Ayuk. And my third one, who also went down yesterday, I chuckle, but I actually feel awful because this injury looked atrocious, and that's Chris Godwin. Dislocated ankle. He is slated to have surgery. He's done for the year as well. And there goes my three receivers in my redraft league.
It's such a brutal season with injuries. I don't know if it's because we are we've always been very invested in fantasy, but this year obviously tracking it even more closely. I don't know if there's more injuries this year or if we're just paying attention more to it, but
dude, I've never had a season where I've lost my three starting wide receivers.
Yeah, that's...
Let alone for the year. I mean, Metcalf will come back, but it's just insane. Like, usually you get an injury or two, or someone's going to miss a few games here and there, but maybe it's one player or two players. I'm seeing teams with... Some teams are perfectly fine, but I'm seeing teams with 3-4 players on the IR and taking up roster spots in our dynasty leagues.
Yeah.
It's definitely been more prevalent this year than I've...
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, there's some young wide receivers on these teams that I kind of like in the absence of some of these players. Like, I think Jalen McMillan's worth a grab. I think Jackson Smith and Jig is probably on a team, but he might become more startable now.
Yeah.
Jacob Cowing is the one guy in San Francisco that I actually like a lot. He seemed to get a good amount of targets from Purdy when Ayuk and Debo went off the field, and he might, by default, become the number one option there, at least this next week, and build a role for himself in the offense.
Yeah, and speaking of McMillan, the other wide receivers out, Mike Evans. Another hamstring injury. They're doing an MRI, but first things that I'm seeing is he's going to be out at least until week 11 bye. So that's 4 weeks from now before he's going to be seeing the field again. McMillan, Trey Palmer, look at these guys on the Bucs. Baker's going to have to throw to somebody because he just lost his 1 and 2. Next one is huge loss. Depending, we don't know if he's going to miss time or not yet. That's Jaden Daniels. He's week to week with his chest injury. I'm assuming they're going to do some sort of scan today, but they haven't come out with anything confirming anything. If he doesn't play, the Commanders are trash and they're done. And by done, I mean they're probably going to lose that week because he's not going to be out for an extended period of time. But without him, they're not going to win.
No, they didn't look bad with Mariota while I was in there. I mean, I agree. Obviously, that's a massive, massive downgrade. But who are the Commanders playing this week?
Let's take a quick peek. Commanders are playing. Oh well, yeah. No, wait, hold on. That was last week. I'm like, that's not right. They're not playing the Panthers. They just played the Panthers. So you tell me Mariota looked good just makes me chuckle because it's the Panthers. They're playing the Bears.
Okay, yeah, they'll lose that game without Daniels.
I would take the Bears in that game if you're looking for a bet.
I was looking for a Giants matchup. That's the only one I would have given them a chance with.
Yeah, it's like Giants or Panthers. And then lastly, the doofus that just can't stop himself from getting suspended, Jameson Williams, 2-game suspension for some substance he was taking that he shouldn't be. The story has not come out. There's no details as to like what it was or what he did. I know things can get a little bit fickle in terms of like little things that people will take that they're just not aware or even there. They're being given to them, and then they get blood tested. And that's their fault, though. I'm just going to say that they should really know what's going in their bodies.
The 2-game suspension is weird though for some sort of substance abuse. It has to be minor, so I'm guessing it's one of those like somewhat banned substances that's like not a huge deal, but
so it's some PED, performance enhancing drug. We don't know what it is. They haven't said, and the coach said he can't talk about it until they announce it. All they said is that he's going to be suspended for 2 games, and he was quoted saying he's just got to take this on the chin and move and be ready in 3 weeks when he can come back. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're finally getting your thing together. You're having a good season. It's going pretty well. Detroit's crushing it, and then you do something stupid.
Yeah, I mean, there was some talk of this in the offseason, so it could just be the result, something that happened months ago that's coming out now. Anyway, yeah, sad for my team that James was out for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but
me too.
I think Tim Patrick is an interesting, desperation flex grab. That's the only thing I'll say. He's getting targets more than Sam Laporta. Which,
everything's a stretch grab at this point. Laporta's doing nothing.
You could field a full team of players who were undrafted at this point, just with how many injuries there were.
Yeah, you could probably fill it and do pretty decent, actually. All right, with that said, that's I think that's all we have for. Yeah, that's all the injuries. All the injuries. There's other ones, obviously, defensive players and stuff that got hurt, but things that are fantasy relevant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There was 11 here. 11. It's just ridiculous. All right, let's move on to the studs and duds. We did have some good play this week, even though overall, I think fantasy was pretty low. In multiple leagues I was in, the scoring was pretty low. I think a big reason, something that we usually quote going through, there was only 5 wide receivers that scored over 20 points this week. That's the lowest on the year. And I think that's a big reason that we're seeing such a big shift. The running backs are the ones that actually take the cake this week with having 11 people over 20. It's crazy, man. I don't know, but we broke a record with tight ends with 3 over 20.
Well, at least there's some positives, but yeah.
But all right, you want to kick it off with the QBs?
Yeah, for the QBs, these were both from the Monday night matchup. Our 2 studs were Lamar Jackson with 34.4 points and Baker Mayfield with 29. This was an interesting game. The Ravens got out to a huge lead, and Lamar had a bunch of touchdown passes, some rushing yards. Was doing his Lamar Jackson thing where he is now, I think, the QB1.
MVP.
Yeah, QB1 MVP, for fantasy football. And then Baker, late in the game, they started to put together a bit of a comeback, but it was too little too late. But he was able to grab some, we'll mention this in a second, passing touchdowns to Rashad White and some big runs there. So I think Baker Mayfield obviously slides rest of season with the injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but
I
Lamar
think they're going to
obviously,
go very running back heavy committee, running them in the slot, running them off the as wide receivers. They're going to do whatever they can.
yeah. Kate Otten might move up. There's a
He
few.
will.
I think there's room in that offense, like because McMillan, Otten, Sterling Shepard, even
I mean,
one of
Otten
them.
already had it. He had a game yesterday.
Yeah,
Had 8 catches.
they might be fantasy relevant. So we'll see. As for the duds, this is becoming a recurring theme. I think he has a permanent place on this section of
In
our show.
Dudland.
Is Anthony Richardson. Again, only 8.8 points. The guy is a running back who's playing quarterback, and he can't throw the ball. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba this week actually had a better passing game than Anthony Richardson, which is just an absurd statement to make.
I mean, I don't know if it's he can't throw the ball. He just can't throw it short.
You can't.
It's either cork down the field or it's nothing. Boomer
Elementary
bust.
school Hail Marys is what he's good at, but sure.
I don't get it.
No, I don't think he's startable. I think in redrafts, he's borderline droppable at this point.
Yeah, if you're starting him in redraft, you're an idiot.
Yeah, and the second guy on this list, a little bit surprising that we have him here, but he has not had a great fantasy year, is CJ Stroud. He only put up 5.3 points. Without Nico Collins, CJ Stroud is possibly a bench, I think.
He only had 84 yards this week.
Yeah, I think Nico Collins is super important to Stroud's production and the Texans' offense as a whole. And I think since he doesn't really have rushing upside, if I could find a streamer that's performing a little better right now, I might do that over Stroud.
Well, I mean, I will say he is still a QB1.
Yeah.
He's currently QB12. Granted, he's probably going to lose that, like you just stated. With Collins out, I don't foresee him sticking up there. It's already shown. I don't know where Tank Dell is. He was non-existent. He had 4 targets, no catches this past week. You would expect him to eat a bit more with Collins out, but that has just not happened.
Yeah, no, again,
It's actually crazy.
Dynasty formats, if you can buy them low, go for it, I think. I just think in redraft right now, or you're trying to win your league,
Yeah.
you might be better off finding a different starting QB.
Yep. Okay, let's jump into the studs for running back. Just a quick note, guys. We are doing this off of PPR. So if you are standard, some of these might move around a little bit. But these two had really good games as far as fantasy comes. And the first one is Jahmyr Gibbs coming in with 32 points. No surprise. Montgomery goes to the bench. He's just going to overperform and do really, really well. And he ran all over the field this past week. So 32 points. Then we had Rashad White, who, in lieu of all the injuries, became the primary receiving back and put up 29.1 points based off of a ton of touchdowns. So he had a really good game. This is pretty much what he did last year. This is why he was as successful as he was from a fantasy perspective, because he's just really good out of the backfield as a receiver. We all know his rushing leaves something to be desired, but they put him into a strong suit yesterday, and people paid off for it. It just sucks I had him on the bench because he's done nothing all year. Next, duds. If you're still starting Ramondre Stevenson, I understand it's probably because you have to. But he put in another stinker of 4.2. And the fun stat that I saw this week as I was doing my research is that this is going into this week, it was the 7th O-line combination that the Pats have put out on the field. That means they've had a different OL every single week. And you wonder why their running backs or their quarterbacks are running for their lives every other play. So it's actually really kind of sad and painful to watch. But I would not be starting Stevenson. I wouldn't be starting anyone in that offense if you can avoid it for the time being. Outside of maybe Drake May right now. He might actually be a bit of a streamer. He showed up again this week. He had another good week despite the crapshoot that was going on around him. lastly, another dud. Tony Pollard. I know he hasn't really been talked about a lot this year, mostly because the Titans are hot garbage too. But he put up 8.5. He hasn't had a terrible season, but he has not been performing based off of where people were taking him, which actually surprises me that people were taking him where they were when it comes down to it. But yeah, Tony Pollard with another dud. It's been painful to watch. Where is Pollard in terms of running backs right now? He's currently RB 23. He is behind Tank Bigsby, who's only had 2 really good games this year, and he's played every game.
I mean, the Titans' offense as a whole is just absolutely terrible. I think
Yeah,
Calvin Ridley has 7 PPR fantasy points off of like 17 targets in the past 2 weeks. So that's what they're working with. Mason Rudolph, Will Levis, doesn't matter. Their offense is terrible.
yeah,
They're not viable players on that team. And as for wide receivers, this week was a little interesting. We had 5 finish over 20 points in a full PPR formats. The 3 studs that we pulled out, though, were Rashad Bateman, George Pickens, and Brian Thomas. Rashad Bateman's quietly kind of had a decent season here, at least over the past few weeks. Seems like similar to Mark Andrews, he's becoming more involved in the offense as weeks go on. I still think Zay Flowers is the number 1 wide receiver there, even though he might be, kind of boom or bust guy, depending on the week. But Bateman's not a bad flex streamer guy to have at the bottom of your bench there, I don't think.
yeah. Zay's currently sitting at wide receiver 26, and Bateman's at wide receiver 20. So he's a wide receiver 2 right now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I feel like there's always one wide receiver or one receiving option on the Ravens that does really well, and then Lamar doesn't feed it to anyone else. It seems to be like they just go with the hot hand for the week.
Yeah,
So it's going to be tough to consistently play him, but he'll have some good weeks when we're really into buys and injuries now.
yeah,
And as for the other 2, these 2 I think would be like Pickens and Thomas. I think these are viable flex starters rest of the season, especially given how banged up the rest of the league is.
yep,
Pickens, we had as a potential sit candidate this past week because we really weren't sure how Russell Wilson would impact the offense. And the first half of Russell Wilson's performance, we felt pretty good about our decision to avoid Pickens. But second half, they seemed to put it together. Wilson is a better passer of the ball than Justin Fields, and Pickens is the only person in that offense they really have to worry about feeding. So I think he's going to be have a decent floor rest of the season. And Thomas, we're seeing he might be the second best rookie wide receiver this year, behind maybe Blink Neighbors is my guess.
it would have to be Neighbors.
It'd definitely be Neighbors. I think Thomas has a better QB throwing him the ball, even though Lawrence hasn't been fantastic. And the Jaguars are going to be down most of their games, and they're going to have to throw it. And I think Thomas is going to see much more involvement than almost any other rookie wide receiver in the league this year.
Yeah, he's gradually taking that wide receiver 1 there. Kirk does nothing.
Nope. And Ingram hasn't been Ingram either. As for duds, we're actually looking at another rookie wide receiver. Our first dud was Marvin Harrison Jr. The whole Cardinals offense and Kyler Murray have been up and down this season, but we're starting to see more down performances and we're seeing spike performances. Just based on where you drafted him, though, at the end of the first, early second, I feel like you're probably going to be starting Marvin Harrison Jr. regardless, because he does have that 30-point ceiling in his repertoire. So he is a high-risk, high-reward option, I think, as a starter.
Yeah, right now.
And then our last stud we had was Devontae Adams. He came into a new offense with the Jets this week. He got, I think it was 9 targets, but he only had 3 catches for 30 yards.
Yep.
I think he will very quickly become fantasy relevant again with the Jets, now that they've gotten past one of the toughest defensive schedules in like the opening 7 games in the league. he's going to be the number one target there for Rodgers, I think, and he's going to put up fantasy points.
Yeah, it'll definitely come around. Adjusting to a new offense in a few days is tough for anybody. All right, getting into the last piece here, which is the tight ends. As I mentioned earlier, we had 3 over 20. Starting with number 1, David Njoku coming in with 23.6. What do we see? Deshaun Watson leaves the game. Njoku starts actually getting thrown the ball. I don't know what it is. He performs really well when Deshaun Watson's not the quarterback. He's going to be a very strong start the rest of the season with Watson out. No matter who's at QB, whether it's Winston or the other guy who's not good. It doesn't really matter. Sorry, Dorian Peoples Jones, Robertson, whatever his name is. I don't know.
Dorian Peoples Jones.
Yeah,
You're just combining random football players' names.
Dorian's Peoples Robinson. Whatever. He's going to be in there. It doesn't matter. Njoku's going to be probably more successful if he is the quarterback because he's going to be the check down. I'm expecting tight end Njoku to do really well the rest of the season, just like what you saw him do the last 8 games of last year, possibly. Granted, they don't have Joe Flacco this time. And then the dud, who's another one who's just living in his room as a tight end, Travis Kelce. He gave us a few good weeks, and then went right back to dullness, coming in at 5.7. The Chiefs' offense just looks like crap. Like it's just, in a nutshell, since Rice's went down, and they don't have Pacheco, they just look really off kilter, and a lot of that has to do with Mahomes, who's throwing a ton of interceptions.
Yeah, no, I mean Mahomes is barely fantasy startable anymore. Like the whole offense just looks bad. Without Rice, it feels like they just don't have a consistent way of moving the ball down the field. I mean, Hunt's been decent. Like Noah Gray's been involved. Worthy's capable of big plays, but
Yeah.
Kelce was that guy that just, if they need to move the ball down the field, he was their go-to, and he just is no longer that guy for them.
Yeah, they I don't know, man. It's Mahomes is sitting at QB 22. So if you're starting him, you're pretty desperate at this point. I know you probably took him early because you were stupid, but it's it just is what it is at this point. You kind of gotta lay in your bed like we all do with all our injured players at this point. But it's they're interesting to watch how they've pivoted from being an offensive team to really just a defensive team now with how things have gone down there. But I don't think they're going to remain undefeated at all. It's just a matter of time, and I think they're going to have a nice little losing streak. But I'll give him one thing. Mahomes, despite the fact that his fantasy relevance hasn't really been there, he's been an absolute incredible game manager. He's got like an 85% success rate on scrambles.
No, the Chiefs know how to win games, and they will continue to win games. They could be a good real-life football team and not a good fantasy
Football team.
Yeah.
They'll keep it together. On that note, we'll wrap up this week. We'll see you guys in our next video for the start sits. And we hope you guys have a good day.